This is the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. I'm joined by my co-host, Staley. I'm Drew Rosenberg, and we have a big show today. We have a mailbag episode. Indiana football, 6-0. It's a bye week, which is why we're doing the mailbag episode. Kyler's wearing pink, too, so that's some more news. Kyler, how are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know why that's news that I'm wearing pink, because I wear pink all the time. Just kidding. But yeah, I got a nice pink polo on for you guys watching on YouTube. But yeah, I'm excited for this episode. This is the one that we've been kind of talking about doing it for a little bit. What we've been doing the podcast for probably a year now, somewhere around there. Our very first mailbag episode, and I thought, with the bye week, Indiana basketball getting ready to start with Hoosier Hysteria coming up, recruiting stuff going on. I thought this was the perfect time to do it. And we got some really good questions. I think we got around 8 or so that we're going to answer. But I think it's going to be a fun episode. It'll be kind of fun to just kind of react to what people are wondering. And, hopefully we can give them some good knowledge along the way.
Yeah, and hopefully this will be the first of many mailbag episodes. So, next time you'll probably see us. We'll probably do a story similar to this. Yep. So if you see us posting on Twitter, make sure you comment, reply with a, question or something you want us to talk about. Because we have some funny ones, we have some serious ones. There's a mixed bag of the mailbags, and I think we're gonna start with a funny one. I don't want to say funny. Let's call it fun.
Yeah.
From Britt Crawler. Hypothetically, you grab this year's current Indiana basketball roster and add Trey Jackson-Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino to the team. How far do you think they could go?
I guess I'll go ahead and answer first on this one. Did you say like overloaded? Do you say undefeated? I don't know. That's a really hard one to do. I guess I'm going to be kind of a realist, on this answer and stuff. So like, obviously if you've got these two, there's two other guys that probably aren't on this team right now. So you look at like, probably don't have Umar Ballo, probably don't have him, probably don't have like a Miles Rice somewhere around there. So obviously, could be a dumb answer, but obviously there would be really, really good and pretty overloaded. So somebody's not getting playing time if you add those two in there.
The spacing wouldn't be great, but imagine a front court of Trey Jackson-Davis and Umar Ballo. The shot blocking, the defense, just the buddy ball. The spacing would be disgusting. But
it would be disgusting. The spacing. Woodson would have no choice, and there wouldn't even be an argument for him to not play through the post. He would absolutely have to do that. There would be no argument. But I guess, obviously you've got like Miles Rice and you got Cannon Carlisle this year who kind of have that playmaking role that Jalen Hood-Schifino had and stuff. But obviously those two are like two of the great, two of the best basketball players to put on Indiana jersey in the recent history. So obviously if you're going to throw those guys in there hypothetically, this team's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I don't want to say should win a national championship, but if that much talent, you should at least make the Final Four. It's a funny question just to talk about for, so many reasons. And I want to bring one point up. I guess this is more of a serious point. Ant Wright, when he came on our podcast to talk about Indiana's roster additions, he said his ceiling for IU basketball, he saw it as a Final Four. He said the only reason he didn't see this team winning a national championship is they lacked an NBA guard. He said it's the same reason Purdue lost the national championship last year. So you add Jalen Hood-Schifino to this roster, take away Trey Jackson-Davis, All-American, who is playing very well in the NBA to start his career. It solves the whole Ant put for this roster. So I guess, national championship, it would be, realistic.
That's a really good point and a really good memory because I totally forgot that Ant did that, Drew. So it's spot on. So, but honestly, going off of that, then we can get on to our next question. I think, Miles Rice and Cannon Carlisle, I think those guys got a lot of potential to make the NBA. So I think maybe, by the end of the season, we could be looking at both of those guys as two NBA type of guards. So, but Ant made a really good point there. We'll just kind of see how that, works out. But obviously you throw in Trey Jackson-Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino on this team. This team's probably competing to be undefeated.
Yeah. You said it. How good Cannon Carlisle and Miles Rice are. It's the floor of this team is already pretty high, but that raises the ceiling to new heights if those guys are able to take that next step as college players. But jumping to football now for our next question, coming from GP. How many years do you think we will have Curt Cignetti before he takes a big-time job? Or by big time, a new job And do you know what his contract buyout looks like? Let's start with how long do you think Cignetti stays in Bloomington, Kyler?
That is becoming a very nerve-wracking question, I would say. It really hasn't been too much steam, but there is smoke, I guess. And whether that's real smoke or fake smoke, there's something there right now. Obviously, he hasn't mentioned anything. There hasn't been a whole lot of I feel like it's more Indiana fan speculation than anything right now. I don't think it's more of a national level type of thing right now. Maybe that's going to change as the season progresses, but a big time football job, you're probably looking at like a football school, like a Florida and Auburn, somewhere around there, Baylor, probably. Those will probably be the three if they decide to, move on, from their current coaches. Those would probably be the three top jobs I would imagine being available. But I don't know. I mean, Indiana, here's the thing. Obviously, it's not a football school. It's a basketball school, but Cignetti came in. I think he's got motivation to build Indiana football as a monster, and wants to do that. And obviously, he's shown a lot of progression this season already, a lot quicker than what people had imagined. So, I don't think if I had to, obviously answer right now, that could change in the next 6 weeks or so. I don't think Cignetti's leaving anytime soon. I think this could be his final stop. He is 63 years old. He's not a guy that really wants to move around. He didn't really move a whole lot, in his current, JMU. What was the other one before that? Blanking on Elon. Yeah, he didn't really move a whole lot there. I just don't think Cignetti's the type of guy to just be like, all right, 1 year at Indiana, I'm out of here. See you guys. I just don't think he's like that. But Indiana does have a chance to be a powerhouse when it comes to football, but I mean, obviously you're going to need Cignetti if you're going to do that.
Yeah, John Alden and I talked about this on the the post-game live stream last Saturday. It's one of those question marks because you could easily see him, you mentioned Florida, who it seems likely Billy Napier is going to get fired at the end of the season. So there could be a school that offers a lot of money to get him. But at the same time, Scott Dolson and the Indiana Boosters have shown they're willing to pay a coach if he shows he can do something in this program. When Tom Allen had that 2019 season and followed it up with 2022 really good seasons, he got a huge contract extension from the department. It eventually came back to bite them in the butt, but it's something they're willing to do. So I would not be surprised if we see a massive extension. We've also seen in his contract, there's a ton of incentives. He already reached one for winning, for qualifying for a bowl game. I think it was $250,000. And the second part of the question was the buyout. If Cignetti's leaves Indiana before December 1st this year, it's an $8 million buyout. Next year, $6 million, $4 million the year after. Then the year after that's $2 million, and then $1 million the year after. And it's $1 million until the conclusion of the contract in 2029. So it's one of those things that Cignetti is, you mentioned, he's 63. How much does he really want to move? He's said in the past he doesn't see any reason why a state school like Indiana University can't be a dominant football team. And if he's able to keep building on his start, it's one of those things. Does he want to take the easy route? And Cignetti's someone who, I mean, I haven't asked him directly. He hasn't really been asked directly about it, but he never seems like he wants to take the easy route. He goes to these schools and he wants to rebuild them. He said he thought he was going to stay at JMU his entire career until Indiana, we brought in the big bucks to get him to leave James Madison. So I think it would take a lot to get him to leave at this point.
Yeah, and there's a couple things like one, like you also got to think of the buyouts when it comes to the Floridas, the Auburns, and the Baylors and stuff like that. I mean, if they're going to fire their coaches, they're going to have to pay an extreme amount of a big buyout as well. So you got to wonder, like, are they thinking that as well? Billy Napier, I mean, yeah, he seems like he is majorly on the hot seat and probably is going to lose his job. But, like, honestly, I think Florida still could make a bowl game. So, like, you look at that as a bowl game safe for him or whatnot. Same with, like, Auburn. You look at the buyouts of Hugh Freeze and things like that. But, Cignetti in Indiana football, you got to remember, I think Indiana football's got a sneaky good NIL. I really do. I think they're willing to pay players, and you mentioned it. Scott Dawson's buying in. I mean, he didn't even hesitate to remove Tom Allen when the time was right. He did it almost immediately. So I think Cignetti likes a challenge like that. He's a guy that wants to rebuild Indiana football. I think he's safe for a while. I just don't see him leaving after 1 year. If this was 5 years down the road in Indiana, I won a couple of Big Ten championships and stuff, and he wanted to move on to a SEC school, I could see it, but after 1 year, that's just crazy to me to think that could be a possibility. But there's a little bit of smoke, like I said. I think it's more Indiana speculation because they don't know how to react to the success right now. They've never really seen this, so we'll just kind of wait and see. But I think right now he's safe.
Yeah, and I guess the way college football is going, the only way I could see Cignetti leaving is to go to an SEC school or a bigger Big Ten school. It's just one of those things. He mentioned it, the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, it's pretty clear they're the two premier power conferences in college sports, especially college football. So unless it's one of those two conferences, there's just really no way I see Cignetti leaving. And even so, I still don't see him leaving after this year. The next question comes from Ed Holinsky. A little more positive question. It's just, what kind of alumni feedback? How's the alumni feeling about IU football? He said that New York State IU alumni are loving it and savoring every single bit of it. I can speak from the younger alumni perspective just because I have a lot of friends who've graduated, recent graduates. I mean, I was with a lot of them in Chicago when I was actually at Kirkwood's, an IU bar in Chicago when IU played UCLA. And place was packed. Everyone is going crazy. This is the point where they were just 2-0. Watching this team, the entire bar was getting into it. It was a really fun atmosphere. I mean, at least from my perspective, everyone is loving it. There is the little bit, how long is Cignetti stay in the back of everyone's head, but it's also like this team is really good and has a chance to do something special.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is probably the best time that Indiana football fans have ever had. I mean, even, the 2020 season, obviously that was during COVID. Things were a little weird during COVID. And I think that team still ended up, 9-3, somewhere around there and stuff. But like this team right now is just cooking. They're undefeated. They're 6-0. They're already bowl eligible. They've got a clear path really to, make the Big Ten championship game and possibly be a playoff contender as well. So, obviously I'm not an Indiana alum, so I can't really speak to a lot of that, but I think, just based off the social media interactions, the fan base and how everyone's just reacting, obviously, it's a good time to be an Indiana football fan. It really is. And, they're going to enjoy this right now. Like you said, who knows if Cignetti stays, or he leaves or whatever, but at this current time, you just got to enjoy the moment and enjoy having a really, really good competitive football team.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting, and it's also, it's why these questions you mentioned are coming about Cignetti. How long does he stay? Because this is kind of uncharted territory for
Absolutely.
Indiana football. Like, Tom Allen was kind of an Indiana guy. He'd coached high school here. He was the DC before becoming the head coach. So he had already kind of been established within the state. Cignetti is, a brand new guy. Yeah, he coached IUP, but it's not the same. So him coming here and doing what he's done, it's, built they're really doing this, but also, how long is this really going to last? So it's definitely a fun time, though. And I think, like you had, Ed, most alumni are savoring every bit of it.
Absolutely. It is definitely uncharted territory.
Yeah. Moving on to back to basketball. This question, it's a two-parter. I'm going to just do the first parts from Jackson Ryan. This past season, Woody hit the portal hard while it looks like he's trying to lock up the state's top high school players in 2025. Moving forward, what do you think Woody's strategy is as far as the balance between high school recruits and hitting the transfer portal? Kyle, you start because you're, obviously the recruiting analyst.
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is actually probably my favorite question. So shout out to Jackson Ryan for this question. But I think Woodson, he's just going to go after the best players, right? The ones that make sense and goes into that fits in his system and fits in a need. And I think you said it for a lot of coaches. So what Woodson said the other day, I think it was at Big Ten Media Days, he said he's not going to stop recruiting high school kids because you need high school kids. You have to develop these kids. You have to recruit guys like a Trent Sisley, a Braylon Mullins. You have to recruit those 5-stars, those one and dones. You have to do that if you're a big time program like Indiana is, and trying to get back to a national relevancy with that. But at the same time, you saw the success that Mike Woodson had and his staff had with the transfer portal this season. That's a really, I think with any coach, as long as you have a good balance between that, you're staying active, recruiting the high school kids that you can help develop, that can stay in your program and build off of, but also, filling in the gaps when it comes to the transfer portal. I think that you have a successful strategy in that regard. So I think for Woodson, he's just going to recruit the best guys that just make sense. And I think maybe he'll lean towards the transfer portal a little bit more just because they're experienced players. But at the same time, I think he's still going to recruit high school kids. You just have to at the end of the day. It's a really good question. Obviously, you can't get into Mike Woodson's head right now, but I think he's just going to recruit the best players, the ones that just make sense for his system.
Yeah, I agree. I think this year was a little bit weird. I mean, I think most years we're not going to see Indiana basketball bring in 6 guys in the transfer portal. I just don't see that being sustainable. No matter how much money is being funneled in for NIL, I think it's going to be more of a mix like we're seeing. I think we're going to see it more next year. There's going to be a lot of guys leaving the roster, but ideally Woodson is going to bring in at least 2, maybe 3 high school players. So you couple that with, ideally, I think he wants to bring in, 2, 3 high school, 2, 3 transfers each year and have that cycle. But it's going to be year by year. It's going to be whatever, last year there was so much turnover in the roster. There was 7 open spots. 1 was filled by a freshman. He needed experience, so he brought in 6 transfers. Next year, I'm just going to jump into it because the second part of the question is how many roster spots do you see opening in the coming offseason? Immediately, it's 4 for sure with Dallas James, Ballo, Wheel, and Galloway. But then you have Langdon Hatton, Luke Goody, who are probably also gone. So it could be 6, and that doesn't include if Mbako, Carlisle, Price, any of those guys, Tucker, any of them leave. So 6, 7 potentially open again. And with the freshmen coming in, so ideally – we're going to talk about it more, but Indiana's already landed Trent Sicily. If you can land another, key recruit like an Eric Reed, a Braylon Mullins, Mikkel Brown, Bryson Tiller, if you land 3 of those guys or 2 more in addition to Sicily, now you're looking at 3, 4 transfers. And the way the transfer portal is, changed college basketball, you have to use it. You can't ignore it. It's experience matters, even if it's new guys coming in each year. Obviously, he doesn't want to fully turn the roster over every single year. You can't ignore the transfer portal at this point.
No, you can't. So what? So you said there's 6, there's 4 for sure. I'm going to go ahead and put Luke Goody and Langdon Hatton as, 5 and 6, just a worst case scenario because they are seniors. I actually think that Langdon Hatton is actually out of eligibility. So I think that's 5 for sure. Luke Goody's got a little bit of an argument that he could possibly get a waiver because he was hurt, I think his sophomore year or whatever, but there's a chance for that. So you look at that. So we'll say 6 right off the bat. I think Mackenzie Mbako's going to the NBA. I think after this season, I could also see Malik Renew also, testing the waters at least, going the professional route because he's been here for 3 years, especially if he, shows improvement in his game, spaces the floor out a little bit more, shows that more modern style power forward kind of play. I could see him gone. So I'll say best number right now. I'll say 7. I think there's going to be 7 open spots next year, which that's going to be a lot. It's the same exact, obviously, that they had coming into this season. So, and that's not even including, a guy, you just don't know who would transfer out and whatnot as well. So it's just really, really hard to predict as we stand right now on October 9th. It's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of change, come March, come April and whatnot. So, I'll go with 7 right now. I think 1 guy leaves for the NBA at least, and Mackenzie Mbako, and then you obviously got the 6 seniors that you need to replace.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump to the next question because part of the how many guys leave are going to kind of involve this question. I guess what defines a successful season for Indiana basketball next year?
For me, a lot of Indiana fans are going to probably say national championship or bust. I think that's a little bit crazy to think. Obviously where they haven't made it, past the Sweet 16 in a very long time. So for me, I think a successful season is this. I think it's multiple areas. 1, competing for a Big Ten championship until the very final game. Winning a Big Ten championship obviously would be huge, whether it's the regular season, the tournament, or whatnot. And then I think if you make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, especially the Sweet 16, I think that's success in a lot of ways. Yeah. Now, a lot of people would argue that there's too much talent on this roster. You've got all the pieces. There's no excuses. Indiana should be at least an Elite 8 team. That's crazy to think. That's a lot of pressure on one team. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Duke, Kentucky, Kansas. I don't care who you are. Indiana fans are very desperate, and they're going to say a lot of desperate things in a lot of ways. But I think for me, a successful season, as long as you're competing and you're squarely in the NCAA tournament throughout the entire season. There's no bubble talk or anything like that. First four out, first four in, things like that. There's nothing of that nature. You're solely in. It's just all about being in a really good seed. You're competing for the Big Ten, championship, and you're making it to at least the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. I think that's a successful season and one that you can continue to build off for future years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to add a couple things to that. I mean, I agree with pretty much all of it. I think, competing for a Big Ten title, being competitive in the Big Ten conference tournament, or the Big Ten tournament, if you're able to win that, that's a successful season. You win the regular season title, that's a successful season. But adding to that, obviously second weekend, I don't want to say it's a must, but that's very important, I think. But also, you got to beat Purdue at least once.
Yep.
And then I think if Indiana wins Battleford Atlantis, if you win Battleford Atlantis, beat Purdue once or close to the top of the Big Ten, I mean, I think you could definitely call it a successful season if they get to the second weekend too. So I think there's multiple combos of things to happen, but I really think there's a lot of ways for this team to be successful. There's so much talent, but if they're not able to do any of those things, the Mike Woodson haters might be very happy at the end of the year.
Yeah, if they're not competing, if it's like last year or whatever, they're barely beating the teams that they should be beaten by 20 plus points, things like that. The offense hasn't changed or anything what Mike Woodson stated he wants it to be. Obviously, those who speak louder are going to be heard, and the Mike Woodson haters is what you call them. They're going to be very, very loud, very, very loud, and that'll probably take over the entire fan base when it comes to that. So college basketball is weird. I mean, you can define success in a lot of ways, competing for, your conference championship, going on deeper on the NCAA tournament. It's just really, user preference. I think at the end of the day, what do you prefer, when it comes to success for this Indiana team? Me personally, it's just competing, being a team that can compete for a Big Ten championship. At the end of the day, just doing that and then, making a second weekend run at least in the NCAA tournament. But obviously that varies from person to person.
Yeah, definitely. It's just, it's such a tough question to, define. You can't really define it quantitatively. We will know if it's a successful season when it happens. You'll be able to tell. It's just one of those things you really can't, know for sure without really seeing what happens. I mean, if Indiana basketball, there's a bunch of injuries, and last season they missed the tournament, then it's it's going to be a failure. But if there's a bunch of injuries, they beat Purdue and they still get in the tournament, you could be okay, they were able to make something out of nothing. But it's it's a really tough it's a tough question to answer until you see him play. And I think this kind of takes us into the next question from DRS Throne, which is a very, I don't want to say morbid, but it's kind of a morbid question. If you would replace Mike Woodson, who's the next one up?
Man, morbid. That's a strong word. I wouldn't go that far, but I guess I don't want to look at it as if Mike Woodson gets fired. Me personally, I don't want to answer it that way. I would more want to answer it as down the road or whatever, who's Mike Woodson's successor? Who would you want to see be the next Indiana head coach? So I won't answer it as long as Mike Woodson's going to be fired or whatnot. I won't answer that way. For me, I look at the next up and coming coaches and things like that. I see a guy that fits perfectly for what Indiana could need, 5 years down the road or whatever, whenever Mike Woodson's not there anymore. I like Micah Shrewsbury a lot. He's an Indiana guy. He knows the state. He's recruiting the state very, very well. He just got 5-star Jalen Harrelson, so an Indiana kid. So he grew up an Indiana fan, if I remember reading correctly. So, I think it'd be a perfect fit in a lot of ways. It would be kind of like a dream job for him. I think it'd be a step up from Notre Dame. No offense to any Notre Dame fans that are listening to this, any Notre Dame basketball fans, if those guys exist. So I would go Micah Shrewsbury. I think he would be honestly the perfect. He'd be the guy that I would pick, 5 years down the road or whatever to replace Mike Woodson.
Yeah, I think if you asked everyone last year, the obvious answer was Dusty May, but now at Michigan, it's a little cloudy. I still do think, though, if the Indiana job opened up and it was offered to him, I think he'd have a tough time saying no just because he did go here. He was a manager here. Another guy, not the best human being, but, clearly a very good basketball coach. Chris Beard had a very good connection to Bob Knight. So, there could be that tie in there. I've seen Scott Drew as another name thrown around. thing is, Mike Woodson, he had one bad year. That's the truth. And I get the fans are very disappointed with that year, and they should be. It was really bad. Kyler, you and I were at almost every game. We saw it was hard. It was the basketball was hard to watch. It wasn't just they were losing games they should win. It was the way they were losing and the way they were playing. It just wasn't good. It was, the coaching. A lot of it came on coaching, but the truth is, you give a coach 4 years. That's typically the way it's worked. Archie Miller got 4 years and he didn't make the tournament once. So why, after one season where Woodson was able to take an Archie Miller roster to the tournament and then build on it and go win a tournament game the next year, why is he at all okay? He should be fired after one bad year. So I think if Woodson is bad again this year, if Indiana basketball is bad with this roster, then those conversations should be had. But at this point in time, I don't think they should be.
Yeah. Excuse me. But yeah, you mentioned it. It was rough last year. But at the same time, it's like, you kind of look at it like he makes a point, didn't really have his point guard, throughout the most of the year. It's on him that he didn't have the depth for that. So he takes blame for that. But at the same time, you look at that, how weird and depleted this roster was last year. Still won 19 games, still finished 5th in the Big Ten. I mean, you look at that. Now, obviously, the negatives outweigh the positives in a lot of ways, and you got to kind of be a little bit more real when you're thinking about last year. But the thing is, like, last year's in the past. I think Indiana fans just really need to just move on from that and not harp on that because, yeah, it was a very mediocre season last year, very lackluster year last year, wasn't the best. It's time to move on. They improved this offseason on paper. And I think they're obviously going to be a really good team this year. So time to move on. Mike Woodson is going to learn from it. And I think he's going to obviously just build off of his mistakes. And then he's going to, I think he's going to have this team competing for championships.
Yeah. Next question is, what are, expectations for Indiana football moving forward? I know at the beginning of the year, we all kind of talked about 7-8 wins was like the expectation, but now they're 6-0, 6 games left. I guess I'm going to read out the 6 final games, Kyler, but what do you kind of see is, realistic expectation of the team? So after the bye, they host Nebraska for homecoming. Then the week after, it's Washington in Bloomington. Then they travel to Michigan State to play for the old brass spittoon. And then they host number 24 Michigan. Then they have another bye week before traveling to Ohio State to play in the shoe. And then Old Oak and Bucket game in Bloomington, November 30th.
So is that 6 games left? Is that
yes.
Okay. I think it's 5-1.
Possible.
I think it's 5-1. Expectations. I mean, I'm very, very positive, I guess, with this team. There's going to be some ugly wins. Northwestern was kind of teetering around there a little bit. It got a little bit challenging at times for Indiana. So I think they're going to take care of business when it comes to Nebraska and Washington. They got those at home. I think Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking. I think it's going to be sold out crowds. The Michigan State game, for some reason, even though Michigan State has given me no reason to believe this, but I mean, I'm a little nervous, honestly, for that game. Just a little bit. It's on the road. It's against a, quote unquote rival. The brass platoon, obviously that's something they like competing for. And Indiana's had that was with Tom Allen, obviously, but they've had some really close battles over the recent years with Michigan State. And it's on the road. It's one of those really, really weird games, I guess. So I think they have a chance to beat Michigan when they got Michigan at home. They'll be a ranked team. And then obviously at Ohio State, that's just so difficult. Even though the momentum that they have, that's just so difficult to just see them winning that game, even if they are undefeated going into that. And then Purdue game, I think they'll handle Purdue and beat them by 4 touchdowns. I really do. So, but yeah, I mean, this team's going to be competing. They're going to be competing for a Big Ten, championship berth, competing for a playoff spot. It's hard for me to imagine them undefeated the rest of the way through.
Yeah, I think 4-2, 5-1 is kind of where I see it. I mean, Nebraska I think it's going to be a tougher game than people kind of think. I really like Dylan Raiola. I don't know if he's there yet, but he is going to be a really good quarterback. You also, Washington has, they just beat Michigan at the same time. Not really sure. They lost to Rutgers. I don't know how good they are. Michigan is going to be kind of a toss-up game, I see. Just that offense is so bad, but that defense is still really good. Again, you mentioned Michigan State. It's a rivalry game, so it's a weird one. Purdue, you should win that. And then Ohio State, That's a really tough game. You win Ohio State, we start talking about Indiana could win a national championship. And I just pulled up the quote because I wanted to find it because Mikhail Kamara said it after the game. Right now, this is not the goal. Being 6-0 isn't necessarily the goal. The goal is to go and try to win a natty. So right now, it's great to be 6-0, especially going into the bye week. We'll definitely enjoy it for sure. But once you come back, we got to go and start over with Nebraska and keep the ball rolling. This is fantastic, but this is not the end.
Yeah, it's not. And Cignetti knows that. The team knows that. That was not the goal. A lot of the Indiana fans, the goal was, I'll make a bowl game this year and you're smooth sailing or whatever. Cignetti had a goal this whole time to compete for the Big Ten championship. That's exactly what he had. And this team's buying off of it, and they're playing really, really good football. And they got a chance to do that. So it's going to be a tough one. I think the real part of the season starts next week versus Nebraska. Yeah. You said not going to be an easy one, but I think, college football, when it comes to home field advantage, it's a real thing. And I think Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking. The fans, the students are going to be rocking. It's homecoming weekend. The Hoosier Hysteria the week before, or the night before, It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be one of the best weekends in Bloomington in a long time, as long as Indiana takes care of business and keeps climbing up that ladder when it comes to the rankings.
Yeah. Also, shout out Coach Sig. Already has clinched a $250,000 bonus for making a bowl game. So, good start. Yeah, get that bag. Roll out the Brinks truck for him, Scott Dolson. Do not let him leave Bloomington.
Right, a blank check.
Exactly. All right, last question before we wrap up. Rank in order of the likeliness of them committing to Indiana basketball of these top recruits: Braylon Mullins, Eric Reeb, Bryson Tiller, Mikkel Brown, all perennial high. I think 3 of them are 5 stars, 2 or 1, and then Reeb is a 4-star, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it probably just depends on the outlet that you look at. Definitely Bryson Tiller's a 4 or 5-star, depending on the outlet you look at. Reeb, probably the same way. Mullins, consensus 5-star. Mikkel Brown, a consensus 5-star. But I think, honestly, the likeliness you look at is kind of how you rate it in order. I think Mullins is the number 1 target. He's right there. That's their number 1 target that they need. Eric Reeb, or Reeby, or however you pronounce his name. I'm going to learn how to pronounce it at some point. But I think, Indiana's making a push for him. He was listed in their final 5. Bryson Tiller, I think he's a sneaky one. They've been, kind of recruiting him for probably, I would say, around 2 years or so. They made multiple trips down to Atlanta to Overtime Elite to watch him play. So there's that Atlanta connection. I think he's more of a hometown kid, though, if I had to imagine. So I think Auburn or Georgia Tech, I think that's likely for him. Then Mikkel Brown, you can make an argument that they'll, make a push for him since they lost out on Jalen Harrelson. But I think Mikkel Brown's recruitment's kind of going off, in a different direction. I think there's other schools, other blue blood programs that are kind of taking over from Indiana. Obviously, if Indiana wanted to, they can make a really strong last push with him. But I just don't see him as likely. So I'll go Mullins, Reeb, Tiller, and then Brown.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of can't really argue with it. You're the expert. You've got the, more inside knowledge than I do. But I think of the group, Mullins and Reeb are the most likely. And I think Mullins, the connection, obviously, with Sicily is definitely a big boost. Plus Woodson, obviously you have these big programs, UConn, UNC. But Woodson was, there way before them all. He was recruiting him since his freshman year of high school. So that, I think, should play a big advantage.
Yeah. And we're going to find out with Mullins, in the next 2 weeks. It's coming up quick. Yeah. It's been a long recruitment. It has been a very, very long recruitment, but it's been fun to watch Mullins, being an in-state kid, a guy that I've watched since his freshman year, just how he's grown as a player, on a national scale has been kind of crazy to see. It's honestly probably one of my favorite, stock rising kids that I've seen, from the state in a long, long time. So just see his development has just been phenomenal. So, Indiana, that is their number 1 target. That is the guy that they really, really want, really, really need. And I think if you get him along with Sicily, the rest of it, it's just kind of you're playing with house money at that point. So if you land Eric Reeves, that's just, the cherry on top with it. But Tiller would be a good pickup. Mikkel Brown obviously would be a really good pickup as well. So, I think Mullins, obviously the top guy to look at, Reeve, Tiller, then Brown.
Yeah. And while Indiana football is not competing this week, I mean, there's great slate of games, especially in the Big Ten. Ohio State at Oregon. I mean, Red River rivalry, Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU this week. We're not going to have you covered for that. So, have fun. Enjoy your weekend off from watching Indiana football, because next weekend we'll be back with all the coverage of Indiana football. In the meantime, Indiana basketball recruiting. Ant Wright just wrote a really good story about Kurt Signetti and Indiana football on our page. I just had a story about Bryson Tucker. You had one about Malik Renew. Ton of new articles every single day. Recruiting news. John Alden has the In Touch with Indiana Sports on YouTube Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So for all things IU athletics, make sure you're following Indiana_FRN on Twitter, Facebook, and check out the HoosierIllustrated.com website. And make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. I'm not sure if we've hit 500 subscribers. I know we're close.
No, we have, Drew. We are at 500. So if you've listened all the way through, I want to say thank you for those that have subscribed. But the people that haven't subscribed, what are you doing? You hit that subscribe button. It takes half a second to do. So we really appreciate it. It allows us to grow this YouTube page. It allows us to do a whole lot more. There's going to be content, for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's going to be nonstop content. Like you mentioned, John's show has been awesome. He's at 33 episodes right now, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're hoping for a live show here coming soon. So there's a little tease with that. We're going to start doing more of that. The post-game wrap-up shows, we love when you guys interact with us. That's what makes those fun. It gets pretty boring just listening to us talk the whole time with that. But the post-game wrap-ups, we'll continue to do those, throughout the rest of the Indiana football season. Basketball season, we'll have them for every single game. So, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button so you don't miss anything. We'll have, recruiting highlights, post-game pressers, all that stuff will be on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button, please. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. And if you didn't need any more motivation to subscribe, Kyler's wearing a pink shirt. So you know what? If you're going to subscribe for any one reason today, that should be your reason. But in case you didn't know, Hoosier Illustrated has partnered with Tom Brady's company, Autograph, to streamline our coverage so you guys can do what you do best. Follow IU Sports. Use the code INDIANAFR to get started today. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back next week.